This month's webinar will be about our submissions platform, Editorial Manager, but also the things around that we built and integrate with Editorial Manager. So we are very excited for this opportunity to tell you about the things we have developed and our plans for the coming years. Speakers are Navid Wazadi. He's the Senior Director of Product Management within Elsevier. He's been with us for 5 years in this role and previously worked many years at various global technology companies. The second speaker we have is Nathan Westgard, who is VP Product Management at Aries Systems. He joined Aries in 2021 and he previously worked at Elsevier at various products such as Mendeley or Science Direct. So I'm very happy that we found them available to give this presentation today, and I'd like to give the floor to Navid.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jose. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It is very exciting to be here presenting to you who are users of the platform that my team as well as Nathan's team have been working on to try and improve. So, I understand that basically as scientists, as researchers, as clinicians, you really want us to make your editorial duties as simple as possible using technology. So I hope that when we go through this roadmap and share with you some of the work that my team and Aries team have been working on, that you'll see that we're solving the right problems. And if we're not, that you'll be kind enough to provide us feedback around that. So what we're going to cover today is I'm going to spend a bit of time initially talking about your role in the editorial system, in particular, some of the improvements that we're making there for editors. Then I'll move on to reviewers and how we're trying to engage them to be more active participant in the community and supporting you as editors. We'll talk a bit about authors. Obviously, they are providing the research content, and what we really aim to do is try to make them successful. So I'll talk about some of the technology improvements that we're making to help make authors successful. And then I'll round up with talking a little bit about the general work that we're doing around maintaining trust, because that's essentially what the journals are there to provide, is to provide that peer review trust in the research, and technology can help with that. Then I'll hand over to my colleague Nathan, who will run through a number of key improvements in Editorial Manager, and we should have about 5-10 minutes at the end for Q&A. I understand you can put in your questions as well in the chat, so my other colleagues on the call here will respond to those questions, but if there's any that remain at the end, I'll be happy to take them with Nathan. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, a bit of context in terms of how we work in Elsevier. So as you heard from Jose, I've been with Elsevier for 5 years now. And the way we try to work in Elsevier is to focus on the problems that we want to solve for the journal community. I've already mentioned, that we want to help authors be successful, we want to support you as editors, and we want to engage reviewers. Now, specifically within those categories, what we're trying to do is solve some quite specific problems. So maybe starting with the editor yourself, one of the key pain points that we hear about is the number of submissions and the volumes continues to grow every year. New researchers coming on board, which is fantastic to see the research community grow, but that puts pressure on your work. So how do we help you manage that? We also know that one of the key challenges in this whole process is you finding reviewers. So that's a problem that we've been trying to address for about 3 or 4 years, and I'll share with you some of the latest developments there. Actually, on the right of the editors continuing with reviewers, we want to engage reviewers. We know there's always pressure as the number of authors and submissions grows. That pressure is also passed on to the reviewer pool that you have. So one of the problems that we're focusing on is how do we help junior reviewers to climb up the journal quality ladder? How do we give them that experience to go from one journal to the next journal within their field to perform higher quality reviews. And then coming back to the author on the left-hand side, for the author, it's really, they've put a lot of effort into that research, and they really need to find the right home for their manuscript. Elsevier itself, it publishes about 2,600 journals. Obviously, a lot of other journals exist with other publishers. One of the things that we're focused on is how do we help the author find the right journal to publish within Elsevier. And if they're not successful, we know that, a lot of authors are not successful with their first choice, maybe not even with their second choice. So if that's the case, they're not successful with their first choice, how do we make it as simple as possible for them to transfer their submission from the original journal to the new journal for you as editors to consider that? And then right at the bottom, we've got things that are relevant to all the stakeholders in this ecosystem. So how do we maintain trust within the community around peer review? We'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll wrap up with how we can help make your publishing tasks easier and faster with Editorial Manager. So what I'll talk about is, to make it concrete, I'll talk about the actual solutions that we're building to address those problems. The solutions are all the ones in the orange boxes. Some of them are, I guess, they're a bit clearer in terms of messaging than others, and I'll walk through with some screenshots of each one of these. So I'm going to start with the Elsevier-led development, and starting with the work that we're doing specifically for you as editors. There's three key tools that I want to promote and mention in this particular webinar, starting with scope match, then moving on to potential duplicates, and then I'll come back to the fine reviewers. Now, just before going into those solutions, I want to take a quick step back a couple of years to 2020. I'm sure many of you on this call have been an editor at that time, and you would have noticed that Elsevier was in a big program to try to migrate all of our journals from EES and eVice onto Editorial Manager. Now, at the time, there was a lot of effort that everybody had to put in, including yourself. There was a lot of change, learning new systems. But us moving into Editorial Manager and having all of our journals in a single platform that was stable allowed us to be able to deliver some of the tools and technologies that I'm going to talk about in the coming slides. Also, on the left-hand side, what you can see on the screen here is a screenshot of a proof of concept that we did back in 2020. It was called the Manuscript Dashboard. About 70 of our journals out of the portfolio of 2,600 took part in this proof of concept. And what I wanted to also highlight on this, apart from the migration that happened in 2020, we also have been working on how do we test the solutions that we have to try to make sure that when we deliver a solution to you through the system or to reviewers and authors, that it actually solves your problem. So this is an example of Manuscript Dashboard. Now, what happened actually with this proof of concept is that we ended up taking to production a couple of these tiles that you can see on the screen here. So, and I'll talk a little bit about the references, which is one of those that's coming this year. And also I'll start by talking about this tile here, which is actually now called Scope Match. So yes, the question is, how do we manage with more submissions? The volume of submissions continues to grow, usually on average about double digits every year. Last year, I guess it was a bit of an exception due to the previous year and the volume really rapidly increasing with the first year of the pandemic. But we continue to expect the submissions to grow. So how do we help you manage that? I mentioned Scope Match. So Scope Match is one of those services that is there to help you. We know that in a lot of cases, when you receive a submission, the scope of the paper is one of the first things that you look at. Does the scope fit the vision that you have for the journal, the type of content that you are looking to publish within your journal? And so what Scope Match does, it takes a paper that's coming in, and it creates a scope match score based on what you have previously published. And it also shows you, based on the papers that you've previously published in your journal, what are the closest matching papers, and also what papers match the paper that's just come in other journals. And that's basically what you can see on the left and you can see on the right. And this, we hope, will allow you to make a faster, but also probably a better decision when it comes to whether the paper that's just come in is the right scope for your journal. And this is on our roadmap for this year, and should be launched very soon, I hope in the next few months, definitely in the first half of the year. And we're looking to really scale that across all journals as quickly as possible. The second tool I want to talk about is, we know that also when it comes to submissions, there's a lot of duplicate submissions. Now, there's different types of duplicate submissions. There's obviously, on the one hand, on the one extreme, you've got plagiarism, and you already have Authenticate, which helps you identify that. The other hand, it might be somebody who's previously submitted to your journal, they've been rejected, and they go ahead and submit again. And for that, you also have a tool already in Editorial Manager called the duplicate submission check, which is available from the manuscript details screen. The tool that we are working on right now, which is just being launched for 100 journals, and we are looking to scale it in the coming weeks and months, is called the cross-journal potential duplicate submission. And this tries to tackle a very specific problem where some authors do submit their paper to multiple journals at Elsevier at the same time, which is not something that we allow. We say that this is not the right practice. This is, and that when you submit to a journal, you shouldn't be submitting to another journal at the same time. But it's very difficult for you sitting in as an editor in one journal to know whether that's the case in another journal. And so we've built this tool that basically scans all of the papers that are coming in, and it compares it to all the papers that are currently in progress across all of Elsevier's journals. And where it finds that there is a match based on the content of the paper, not just the title and the abstract, but the content of the paper, it will then flag by sending you as an editor and the other editor where the match has been discovered, an email to explain to you that there is potentially a duplicate submission. Now, I say potentially because we know, for using Authenticate, that these systems do require oversight. And so what we're not trying to do is replace the decisions that you have to make, but we're trying to support your decisions and hopefully make it more efficient for you. And obviously, if you do spot a duplicate submission, and this is important because then you can pause the editorial process there to check to see which of the journals the paper should be progressing into editorial, if it should, and therefore saving potentially a lot of time further down the line when it comes to peer reviews. Okay, moving on to one of the key pain points that I know you experience is, how do you find the right reviewers? And finding the right reviewers is not just about finding the right qualified reviewers. It's also about who is willing, who's available, who has time. We all know that peer review is time consuming. It's an activity that's done without compensation to researchers. And so it's really challenging for you as editors, I know, to find reviewers that are willing to accept your review. Over the past few years, we've been working on a tool, as I'm sure you know, called Find Reviewers. This is available through Editorial Manager. Initially, we had a search, we had the Find Reviewers search tool. Then we combined it with a system recommendation. And last year, we launched and scaled the interested reviewers section of the tool. You can see on the third tab within the tool. And more recently, we've just launched the editorial board members tab. Now, the power of this tool is actually what's happening both behind the scenes and what you can see on the screen. So behind the scene, what we're doing is actually connecting all the different data points that you can see here across all the different tabs, so that you get the same information. So if somebody is an interested reviewer, and I'll talk a bit more about what that means from a reviewer perspective, but basically from your perspective, it means that they want to participate in peer review for your journal. If they happen to be an interested reviewer, then we will also flag them if they happen to show up in our system recommendation, or if they happen to show up in the editorial board members tab, because they're a board member and they're available as a system recommendation, then it'll show up here with a tag. And the same, we're trying to make the interface similar as well for you, so that it's easy for you to navigate from one tab to the other and find the same details. There was a lot of improvements that we made to the UI of this last year, including things like showing you the manuscript details, showing you the number of reviewers, providing messages within the tool to help guide you with selecting the reviewers. And we're going to continue to improve this tool this year, because we understand that finding reviewers continues to remain a major challenge for you. And our focus for this year is on providing reviewers more control in terms of how their data appears within this tool. And I'll talk a bit more about that in the reviewer section. We're also going to use the data that we have at Elsevier to make sure that if we identify emails, for example, that are invalid, that those emails don't show up here, so that you're not spending time inviting reviewers that can't be contacted because their email address is invalid. And here's an example of feedback that we had from an editor-in-chief in the field of computer science a couple of years ago, when we tested the fine reviewers system recommendation with them, and they really found that it would help save them time. So this is an example of essentially how we're trying to help you save time in your editorial duties. Okay, now moving on to reviewers. And obviously there is a very strong connection between having an engaged reviewers pool and your previous use case that we were looking at in terms of you finding reviewers. So the tools that I'm going to talk about is, sorry, if I go back one slide. I'm not sure how you go back, actually. Can someone go back for me? Thank you. Yeah, so just before I dive into, I guess, one of the use cases, I'll give you a quick overview of the areas that we're going to look at. So as a reminder, there's two main problems that we're trying to solve for reviewers to get them engaged. One is to help and support junior reviewers. We know that it's, in a lot of cases, junior reviewers are actually supporting the peer review process, either directly or as a co-reviewer with more senior researchers. We also want to help reviewers to do higher quality reviews. And we believe that the best way to do that is to motivate them to allocate their time to peer review and to give them the tools that they need in order to do that. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. Okay, brilliant. So starting with the first use case of how do I climb up the journal quality ladder? We have a hub, it's called the Reviewer Hub, that's accessible by all researchers at elsevier.com/reviewers. And when you invite a reviewer, within the email, it should include a link to the Reviewer Hub for reviewers to be able to go in there and access the Reviewer Hub. But also we promote the Reviewer Hub in other ways. And one of the ways that we're doing that is to actually try to promote it to early career researchers and say to researchers, look, if you're interested in participating in peer review, we know that you could sit there and wait for editors to find you, okay? But what we've done is help now create a workflow where you can actually proactively go in there and say, look, I want to review for finite elements in analysis and design, as an example, or whatever journal it is that you're interested in reviewing for. So it might be a journal that you've previously submitted to. It might be a journal that is in your field, you haven't submitted to it, but actually you would like to try and create that connection with yourselves in the editorial board. And so you want to express an interest in volunteering as a reviewer. Whatever the motivation is, you go to Reviewer Hub, click on the volunteer for journals, and then through there, you can create a profile and select the journals that you want to show an interest in reviewing for. Now that was all delivered last year. And for this year, what we're focusing on within the Reviewer Hub is primarily reviewer preferences. So what I've just covered with you is a case where reviewers want to review for a particular journal. We have the opposite end as well. There are reviewers or researchers that don't want to be reviewing for a particular journal. It could be for a number of reasons. It could be because they don't actually they don't have the qualifications to review for that journal, and for some reason they seem to be matched on keywords and they're getting review invitations and they want to prevent that from happening. Another reason might be because of time. They just simply don't have the time and they want to therefore prioritize certain journals and to review for over others. So that's basically what we're looking at in terms of review preferences, something that the team is working on right now as I speak. And I hope that we'll have some updates and some releases around this technology in the coming months before the middle of the year. So just some stats on the volunteer for review. As you can see at the bottom there, it's a tool that we launched, as I said, last year. It's being scaled and it's being used now by about 1.2 K, so 1,200 editors. Invitations are being sent to interested reviewers through the Find Reviewers tool. And about 12,000 new profiles are being submitted every month. And these 12,000 profiles get added to the previous profiles that were submitted that are available in the Interested Reviewers tab on Find Reviewers. So moving on to how do I do a quality review? This is actually something that we worked on quite a bit in a couple of years ago, has been, I guess, available in eVice and EES, and we're consolidating these features on the Reviewer Hub and promoting them more. But I just wanted to reiterate that for reviewers, we do offer complimentary access to Science Direct and Scopus. Now, not all researchers and not all institutions will have access to that content. So we believe it's a really valuable tool for those researchers that don't have access to it, in order for them to be able to access the references in a submission if they're published by Elsevier, and to get access to that, in particular if those papers are not open access. We also provide Reviewer Hub certificates as well. So every time a reviewer completes a review, they'll see within that email that they get from Editorial Manager a link to the Reviewer Hub where they can go in and download the certificate. And again, this is a great way to engage junior reviewers who want to demonstrate to the faculty the effort that they're putting in every year in terms of reviewing. Okay, moving on to how do we help authors succeed? At the end of the day, we are here to support researchers. Yourself, you're probably one of those, and you will submit just like an author. And so our goal in the publishing group is to help technology that can help identify the authors and to support them to succeed. And we focus on two of those problems, as I mentioned at the beginning, but as a reminder, how do I find the right home for the manuscripts? And I'm going to talk about the manuscript pool. And then secondly, how do I transfer my manuscript to another journal? Because we know in a lot of cases, authors are not successful in that first journal. And so I'll talk about transfer your manuscript. Okay, starting with the first use case. I hope that most of you are familiar already with Journal Finder. That's basically the tool that we've got on the left. Actually, I think all publishers pretty much have a Journal Finder. Elsevier is no exception. This is a standard tool that if an author is interested in publishing with Elsevier, or they can go to, put in the abstract and the title of their manuscript. They might want to filter based on open access or other filters, and then it will present to them a list of journals, including some key statistics for them to choose. Now, this is a self-service tool that authors will use on their own. What we've looked at doing in the past few months, and it's just recently been released to the cardiology group of journals, and we hope to scale it further this year, is a new concept called manuscript pool. And this is similar to Journal Finder, except it's where editors are also there to help. And the way this manuscript pool concept works is that authors initially express an interest in a group of journals that they want to publish with. Then the editors of those journals get a preview of that paper without the paper having been submitted to them. And then the editors then can choose to say whether they're interested in receiving that paper or not. So this is a great way to connect editors and authors together and to give authors an early signal in terms of the viability of them being published in that journal. So you can see on the right-hand side an example of the email that actually is received by the author that says, you know, the editor would like to invite you to submit your manuscript for their consideration. And here's an example of what the screen would look like from your perspective, from the editor. If the author originally expressed an interest in submitting to your journal, then you would see the title and the abstract of the manuscript, and you'll simply just have an invite or decline button that allows you to then go back behind the scenes to the author. The system will take care of all of the emailing behind the scenes to express the author that you're interested in that particular paper, should they decide to go ahead and submit to you. Another concept that we're working on is more related to the transfer use case, is a single page application that will help authors to decide where they go to publish next. We've done a lot of research on this in the past few months, thanks to our colleagues in user research and user design. And we know that actually authors will come in usually and submit to a paper already having a list of journals that they want to be considered for if they're not successful in that first journal. And so what we've tried to do is to take that learning and create a single page application that will allow authors, if they are unlucky to be rejected from the original journal, to see the journals that they could transfer the manuscript to. What I'm sharing with you on the screen is actually what we launched last year. There's going to be a lot more development on this year. And one of the key changes that we're going to make on this tool is to give authors more control. So traditionally, the transfer process has been editor-led. So as the editor that's rejecting a paper, you can decide to reject and transfer that paper and offer authors some options. And we know from our research and speaking to you as editors that you also sometimes struggle to know which journal within Elsevier that paper should be transferred to. So we're going to try to help you by, in those cases where either as an editor, you don't know where to transfer the paper to, or if the author decides, I don't want to transfer the paper to one of the journals that editors have selected, we're going to this year focus on giving the authors more control for where they transfer. And the ultimate goal here with the transfer is to help make it easy for authors to take their data that they've already spent time filling in forms in the submission system to the new journal, so that that process of submission is as easy as possible. We're doing quite a lot of things on authors, and I won't cover these in as much detail, but I just wanted to very quickly highlight that we have more teams working on improving the author experience this year than we've ever had before. And so you'll hear about some of these developments as they get launched in the coming months. We're going to provide the facility for authors to track their submissions more granularly during the peer review stage, which often is the longest part of the editorial process. So they can actually see how many reviewers have already looked at their paper, where that paper is in the peer review process. We're going to launch a new tool that allows authors to check their submission to make sure that they've provided all the right files and the right information that they need at the point of revision, so that if the paper then goes on to be accepted, that there aren't any delays during the publication process, which can be very frustrating for all the parties involved. We focus on research data linking and making data more accessible as part of the published article, and also credit, which is a taxonomy for how researchers could classify the authorship on the paper. These are two services that we're looking to scale. And then last but not least, we'll continue to look at publishing options and to make sure that where authors have a choice of publishing in open access or hybrid or subscription, that they have all the information that they need in order to make an informed choice, but that we also collect all the right information for them at the point of submission, so that there aren't any delays later on down the line after acceptance. Okay, and I'm just going to now spend a few minutes wrapping up my part and then hand over to my colleague Nathan. And I want to talk about the important topic of maintaining trust within the community. Now, this applies to you, whether you're an author or acting as a reviewer or acting as an editor. We know that your role in particular you will take on a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to maintaining trust. We do that already by providing you some tools like Authenticate, that we spoke about, the duplicate checker and the potential duplicates submission alert. But I want to focus in on two of the other tools that we've been working on, which is declarations and citation integrity. Declarations, starting with declarations, this is related to researchers and identifying conflicts of interest. Now, we've moved away in publishing from conflicts of interest to actually identifying declarations of interest, because it gives us a broader sense of the, the connections between the researchers and the business community, or where there might be potential conflicts. And so the idea is to be ultimately more transparent with declarations of interest than with conflicts of interest. But we also know that it's not easy to create declarations of interest. What information do you put in the declarations? And so what we've done is to build a tool that takes authors and co-authors step by step through that process. Essentially, these 4 steps that you can see on the screen here. This is available to anyone. You can access it. We launched it last year. So it's available at declarations.elsevier.com. And it will literally take you as an author or researcher through the step-by-step process to building a declaration of interest statement. It's been integrated in about 900 journals within the submission workflow. And for this year, what we're going to do is to deepen that integration and to make sure that where the integration exists, that we also check to see whether the author has uploaded that file, and that checking burden is not on you as editors or our journal managers, but that the technology actually takes care of that. And the second thing I want to highlight here around the work that we're doing in Trust is the important topic of citations and references. We know, or I know, that within the research community, citations is still very much driving performance, and that's a whole separate debate. What's important for us is citation integrity. We want to help give you tools, but also reviewers, and also in many cases authors as well, give them the tools to be able to understand when they're referencing a paper, what kind of paper are they referencing. And there's been some really interesting innovations, I think, in the publishing tech space around this. And we wanted to also leverage the technology that we have, the data science, the data and the analytics that we have, to build a more powerful tool for you to analyze the references in the submission. So we've named it Analyze Manuscript References. This is currently there's a prototype that's only accessible internally, and we should see in the coming months version 1 being launched. Then we'll take an iterative approach and upgrade it with more filters and some more insights. For example, retracted papers. Are any of the references within the submission retracted? Are any of the references within the paper citing the author's own papers? We've done a lot of research around this, and we know that this is not a black and white thing. And so we're trying to provide the tools that will help you answer some of the questions that you probably are thinking about, and hopefully make answering those questions easier for you so that you can actually focus on the science and the research and maintaining that trust within the community. So with that said, I think that's the last slide. I will just cover here, thanks to Yosei for putting this slide together, that there are many ways that you can stay up to date about what we're doing on the submissions platform, including the little question mark icon that you've got within Editorial Manager, within the tools that we've developed, the editor desk. There's editor emails that we provide through the publishers, and also the editor's update section on elsevier.com. And I hope that you found this presentation useful. My email address was on the previous slide. We'll also make sure it's on the chat in case you have any follow-up questions after the webinar. I'll be happy to be contacted and to reply directly to you. So with that said, I'll hand over now to Nathan, who's going to take us through some of the work that we're doing on the Editorial Manager system.
Thanks, Navid. You can hear me okay? Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here today. to give an update on Editorial Manager, alongside Navid's update on Elsevier's various capabilities that are available or integrated to form the whole submission platform. There we go. Okay. I'll be giving an update specifically on two major Editorial Manager initiatives that we've been undertaking on improving the performance of the system and our user interface refresh. But I wanted to start with a quick overview of Aries, since the company itself may not be as familiar to you as Editorial Manager. Aries is a market leader of workflow solutions in submission and peer review, as well as post-acceptance production workflows, primarily for academic journals and book content. Elsevier, of course, have their journal submissions running through Editorial Manager, but including Elsevier, we support over 8,500 publications for customers that include many multinational publishers and learned societies. Aries was founded in 1986, but was reasonably recently acquired, I guess in the lifetime of the company, by Elsevier in 2018. Our two major products, Editorial Manager for submission and peer review tracking, and Production Manager for commercial production tracking. Our products fit into the academic publishing as end-to-end publishing solutions, as you know. After the initial author submission to a journal, EM supports the initial evaluation, editor review, peer review, and then decisions and revision workflows. And once an accept decision's been made, the manuscript moves into Production Manager for copy editing, typesetting, proofing, and corrections, finally to be output as a PDF and HTML and other formats. Elsevier has a specific implementation of EM, which includes integrations with several purpose-built capabilities that Navid's been giving an update about. So onto performance improvements initiative that we have going. Aries is committed to supporting our customers, and we understand how critical the stability of Editorial Manager is. And since late 2020, we've been prioritizing a specific performance improvement initiative, which has included infrastructure updates, additional server capacity, code refactoring, and development into new development languages. Examples of the improvements we've made since late 2020 is adding monitoring and alerting tools, added database capacity and server capacity to run the jobs, like creating PDFs in the background, as well as some updating some of the really complex workflows that we've seen in monitoring or received feedback on being particularly slow. And the results of that, at the close of 2020, Aries made a 17% improvement in page load speeds compared to the previous averages in Q3 2020. You can see the graph here of in Q1, we made a further 24% improvement in the page load speeds of Editorial Manager. And we maintained that lower page load speed throughout Q2 and Q3 last year. And then unfortunately had a couple of weeks in October and November where we had some issues, but those have since been resolved, and the page load speeds are coming back down to the Q2, Q3 levels. And we've gotten the Editorial Manager to the point now where it's one of the better performing products compared to Elsevier products in countries that generally have really slow connections, such as China, which is nice to see. And more importantly, we have a lot more improvements to come. We've only really just started on this effort. So following on from this year's efforts on focused performance improvements, we have more application and infrastructure updates underway, and Aries is now also undertaking a cloud migration project to further improve performance and scalability. So our plans this year and next year on this front are to move the data to the cloud, including our sort of binary large object data, like all the submission files, and also the correspondence history. So that'll be the first thing to move, and it'll free up space in our data center and make things run faster even during the project. And then later in the year, moving all the services, the actual application, the asynchronous servers and jobs like the PDF builders, and all that moving up to the cloud as well, which would help with the scalability, especially during peak load times of usage. And as well as the performance improvements and cloud migration efforts, Aries is undertaking a multi-phase user interface redesign initiative. You can read more on the Aries blog about this initiative if you'd like. but I'll give you a taste of things to come today. The initial focus areas that we've been working on already are our design system, and then the product changes specifically being a primary or main navigation bar redesign, author and reviewer main menus and folders, and the reviewer invitation redesign, and some specific accessibility improvements. While working on the redesign project, we've created a design system for Editorial Manager, which enables us to roll out consistent design patterns across the whole product, as well as improving the product accessibility. The navigation bar is the first in a series of updates that we were introducing. The updated navigation bar included both user experience and user interface enhancements designed to improve usability and accessibility of the sort of main navigation of the system. And that's currently in pilot with a number of our customers. They're trying that out and giving us feedback, and some of the feedback we're addressing before we roll it out completely. The author main menus and folders have been redesigned largely just as a user interface change. Those changes have already been deployed, and you can see them live in the system today. And then the reviewer invitation redesign is in development at the moment, and we hope to release it's quite significant improvements to that in our user interface and experience there. And then I'll give you an update on our accessibility updates that we're making as well. So, but let me show you some of these changes and what they'll look like in the system, or at least as they're planned anyway, because I'm sure that visuals will be more interesting to see. So on the design system, we developed a relatively comprehensive system early on, and as efforts were taken to look at redesigns and talking with users about how to achieve those, more components have been and will continue to be introduced to the design system for throughout the refresh initiative. And having this design system doesn't just improve consistency, it also helps speed up the user experience and design process. And we believe it's a worthy foundation for us to spend time on a project like this. And the design system includes things like the colors we should use, the fonts, the icons, and various other imagery in the application, as well as making kind of standardized components, like what all of the buttons should look like throughout the product. So for those that are not aware of the design system concept. And the next is the new Editorial Manager main navigation bar. It's had some major style update. Oh, so I'll show you the existing one here. I haven't clicked through to show you the old one. So this one you're probably quite familiar with. Depending on the journal, obviously, it might look slightly different that you're used to working with. But this, obviously, it's a big change to the product. It impacts all users across the entire product and every page. And we're making some UI and UX updates to this to include things like drop-down menus. Hopefully, we've done a lot of testing with users. We hope the new menu system is intuitive to navigate and to find the things that you would need to click on. And importantly, we've kept all of the sort of functionality of that was in the previous menus and drop downs and things like that. So this is the new navigation bar. As you can see, there are sort of a lot simpler design here, and you can see there's a little drop down on shortcuts and about, which the menus. And then when you collapse this down to a mobile screen, for example, that also moves into a single menu that can actually be used within a small screen. So they're the kinds of updates that we've been working on, and it's in pilot at the moment. As I mentioned, we're now looking at how we can further customize the navigation bar for each of the journals, such as including the journal logo and that sort of thing, so they don't necessarily all look the same. This screenshot shows the existing, previous, because now this has been released, but the old author main menus. Many of you would have been familiar with this, even if you haven't gone in there a while yourself, similar to the editor main menus, for example. What we've done here is mostly user interface updates, but under the hood, we've done a lot of changes to improve the accessibility. The new design is here. It's had a user interface overhaul with new fonts and colors. Under the hood, accessibility updates for things like screen readers or keyboard navigation, but generally also just a cleaner look, and then a bit more larger fonts, easier to click for users that have any difficulties with disabilities and that sort of thing. This is an example of the author folders, for example. And again, we've done some major updates to the way that that looks. Obviously, it's quite difficult to make an interface visually pleasing when there's a lot of data and to show for each of the manuscripts, but we've attempted to do that and then break down the rows with different background colors, for example. And this is the new design that's available today. And then moving into the reviewer invitation workflow, the legacy workflow, we were told, has quite a few challenges. So we're looking at both user interface and user experience enhancements, and generally a simplified interface that still supports the different reviewer search types available. Editorial Manager you can search within your own journal, and obviously then we link out to things like the Find Reviewers tool from here. So that the way that users go into the Find Reviewers tool or search the journal for reviewers that are in the system already, it should become much easier to swap between the options. Our new design is the current up-to-date screenshots of what this should look like when this rolls out in a few months' time. But essentially, we're going to have a tabbed view, and we've moved down to just a single criterion, for example, that most people use. There's no point showing them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, on the first screen, when usually people just use one. If you need to add more search criteria, you can always use the plus button. And then, for example, the external search options on the right-hand side tab, that's for things like the Find Reviewers tool. And if that's the tool you typically use day to day, then that will save your preference and take you back to that place each time you come into the tool. So hopefully, make it a little bit quicker to get your reviewer searches done. And then the results, I mean, this is probably, I guess, more important to some degree for a lot of our users that are especially searching the internal database. But there's a lot of information to show in the, to decide whether a reviewer is the right candidate and to invite or offer it as an alternative or proposal. So we've looked at what we could do to improve this design, and essentially we've tried to pull out the key information that an editor may use to decide on a reviewer, especially if they know who they are. Then a quick glance at all of the people that come back in the results is the first screen, and then obviously you can see here a little drop down, which when you click that, it gives you all the information that you would typically see before. But if I go back to this view, we also are offering configurable columns. So if you if you want to see certain information in this view every time at a glance, you can also configure those columns that way as per your needs. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is our accessibility improvements. And to give you a sense of how important this is, the US CDC estimates that 1 in 4 people have a disability. So that's already a large portion of users that have specific needs that should be catered for in product design. So accessibility is about inclusion. But the way that you typically improve products to cater for the product design for users with that have disability needs, it typically improves the product generally. So, accessibility improvements in the products, it is about inclusion, but it also benefits all users. For our initiative, we've taken an approach of getting sort of fundamentals in place early here too. And that meant focusing on education and exposure across the teams. So we want all the developers, quality engineers, designers, and product managers to understand the importance and best practices around accessibility. And we've taken steps to ensure that accessibility is integrated into everything we design and develop and test going forward. And then we have a goal of meeting the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 AA compliance. That's typically the bar that we're attempting to reach across all Elsevier products, including the submission system tools that Navid's team are working on. And we would typically measure that through what they call a voluntary product accessibility template. It's a test that's undertaken on the product. as well as things like automated testing to make sure that you don't break accessibility when you're making updates. But for Aries, our accessibility updates will be done throughout our redesign initiative, as well as we're making a separate effort to improve entire workflows by roles. And the first one that we're focusing on getting up to that compliance level is the author submission workflow, and that's being scheduled later this quarter as things stand. So yeah, that's to give you a little bit of an insight into our two major initiatives, the performance improvement one and the user.
Thank you very much for attending, and thank you for presenting, Navita and Nathan.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.
So, bye.
Bye.